G'day folks, welcome to another episode of Learn to Paint TV. Rod Moore from Moore Art School and Learn to Paint TV with you here once again. Now this week I thought we'd go back to basics a little bit and do a simpler sort of landscape, just to recap some of the basics that we use to create effective landscape and seascape type paintings. So I've got a photo from my travels in Capertee Valley, and we've done a few paintings from Capertee Valley over the last year or so. So we'll start off with step one of the Moore method of painting, which of course is always our drawing, getting our big shapes mapped onto our canvas. I've got a 12 by 16 inch canvas here today, using a little flat bristle brush for our drawing. And I've got, as we always do, ultramarine blue and alizarin crimson, or permanent alizarin, as it's called in some brands. Other brands it's called permanent crimson. So it's one of those, right? So I just dip some water in the brush. We'll get a little bit of paint there, just make up a mauvey tone for us to use. And whenever we're doing our drawing step, I always like to get a bit of water in there just to keep that paint nice and fluid. Now, we've got a classic horizon line for a landscape, which is around about the 1/3 mark. Okay, rises slightly to the right, but I wouldn't fuss with that too much. And then just above the halfway mark is where the most distant hill runs to, and it runs sort of like, probably runs more like there, just up a little bit of a rise there. And then we've got this one coming down here, running through there, and this is quite a large hillside. The Capertee Valley is a dramatic part of Australia. If you've never been there, I highly recommend you go there if you love painting landscapes, and if you get a chance. Very, very dramatic part of the world there. Now the path here, it crosses around about there, and it comes down right about there. Now make sure you get these lines right with this path, because that's how you get the perspective right. And then it wraps around that way, and it's blocked there by, you know, a gate post there, and that one runs down to there. A couple of thinner ones through there. So pretty simple drawing, this one. The key things: the horizon line at 1/3. Okay, this point here is just above the halfway mark. Okay, and then this one here is the dominant mountain range that runs past that one, blocking that one out of view, and then getting this path, the angles are right. This one's almost straight up and down. Okay, let's do step two now, which is our block-in step. And as I said, I'm going to take a fairly direct approach to this. I don't want to come back to anything that's beyond that foreground horizon line there. So I'm going to go with my big brush. You can see it's a little bit worn and haggard, but that's okay. Don't fuss too much. It's not so much that, you know, what sort of condition the brush is in, is how you use it, right? That's the most important thing. Now what I've got here is a whole lot of white, because I want to make sure we really push the sky and the mountains back as far as we can. So I'm going to take a little bit of the blue and a little pinhead of red, little pinhead of yellow in there, and I'm going to mix those together. And what I'm looking for is a very light, on the blue side, grey. Okay, it's a little bit red, what I've got there. So I'll just pick up a little bit more of that blue. Okay, that just pushes it bluer, and I'll get a little bit more white into that. So there's plenty of paint there. I'm not going to put any water in this, so I've got it loaded up with a whole lot of paint. You can see it on the brush there. Okay, a lot of paint there. And I'll just come in and run it in. So on the white canvas there, it looks, that red in it is really punching through. However, when I get these mountains in, it won't look as red as that. It'll neutralize. Okay, so a lot of paint. Vary your brush strokes up. I think we'll go for a little bit more of a random feel to the brush strokes today. Okay. Leave, you know, nice big movements in the brush marks will give it a sky sense of movement. Okay, so that was pretty easy. Now what we do is we come, so sky is our most distant, it's going to be our lightest. So what we'll do now is we'll add some blue up into the top left hand corner here, Pick up some of that red, get a little bit of that purple. Okay, and then so it's a little bit darker in tone now. We should be able to run that through and create the effect of a distant mountain range, which we have. Okay, let's push that bit up there. Run that into the one in front of it. Okay. Like so. And keep those, those brush marks, keep them nice and random and loose. Don't be too finicky with it. Okay, and now we need to go darker in tone again to get this range in here. However, we don't want it to get too dark at this stage. So I'm going to keep it mostly on the blue side, a little bit more yellow and a little bit more red, and then another chunk of that white there now. Okay, it's a little bit too light. I'll go a bit bluer. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to test it along there, just to make sure that it sits in front of that one, which it does, right? So that's all good. Well, that's the tone we want. It's a bluey grey tone. Makes a nice distant mountain colour. For a mountain that's in the distance there. Now, next step in our blocking is going to be to get this foreground ground colour in. And if you've seen my videos before, you'll know that I like to use an earthy tone and then put our greens over the top of that, our greens and grasses and so on over the top of that earthy tone. So we will do that now. So we'll take this white, a big chunk of the white there. We'll take some of the red, we'll take some yellow, mix all that up. Okay. Get a little bit more white for the distant version of it. That's better. Okay. And I'm just going to layer that in, and that's going to create the horizon line, that warmer tone here now is going to really define that this is where our horizon line will be. Through there. Okay. And now we'll take more red and more yellow into that mix. And I'll just, whoop, that's a bit too much of a jump. So I'll just work it back up into the lighter paint there and just let it gradiate off a bit. That's better. I think we've pretty much got what we need to have happening in there. Got our mid-range trees, we've got nice progression of value there, and it's all greyed in the background. And when I hit this with some punchier greens and yellows in the foreground and some definition and detail, it's going to push all of that distance back, and it's a good example of how do you create that contrast in a painting. So we've finished step 2, our blocking. What we need to do now, of course, is let this dry off, give it a good hour or so, then we'll come back and we'll do step 3 and we'll bring this painting alive. It's a simple little painting, but it's a good instructive painting because of the fact that it does have 2 very separate halves to it. So get up to this point, let it dry right off, and then let's have a go at step 3 shortly. See you then. Okay, welcome back now to step 3 of our painting project here. In step 3, as you know, we do our details, our highlights and our finishing touches. And most of that's going to center around this foreground area here. And what I think we'll do is we'll start off getting these, the main posts in a nice dark colour. Our 3 primary colours from our landscape palette. And of course, if you are unsure about what colours to use and how to mix them, then you should take a look at our colour mixing course, which I go through that in great detail as to why I use certain colours and so on. So we've got a few main posts here which I will mix up a nice dark. So we always start with our blue and our red to get a dark, a little touch of this yellow, and I'm not going to use any white in this. I'll use some white in the highlight, but now what we want to go for is much stronger value to really separate with that back distance there, which we use a lot of white in there. So let me just pick out these posts here. So we have got one here. Okay, so I'm just going to block in the darks for these. Got one that sits alongside it there, it's a little bit fatter. Okay, there's one that runs. Supporting one there. Those supporting ones are important. Make sure you get those in. And take a little bit more paint. There's a thinner one out the back here, which is leaning slightly on an angle. Okay. So see how there's a bit of variety there. We've got the fatter one here, the middle one here, a thinner one there, and we've got the cross angle one there. And all of that just adds to the interest, you know, when you're getting these details down. If you do them all exactly the same shape and the same angle and everything, then it will be a little bit on the boring side for the viewer. Okay, so that one's running that way. It has a support that runs to there. There is a cattle grate there. Okay. Then these ones here, actually there's one that runs there, there's one slightly smaller behind it, and there's a support one there. And the more of the cadmium yellow medium I mix in, it will lighten it in value as well, because it's fairly light just around through there. We start to get these lovely grasses and things. Obviously they had good rain. Notice the variety of brush strokes that I'm using here as well. I'm not just using the one stroke, and I'm missing a lot of spots as well. And that's why it's important to have this underpainting on. Somebody left a comment on my YouTube saying, you know, why bother with the blocking first part of the painting? And well, really the reason why we bother is because that enables us to get this staccato effect by blocking in, by putting these grasses and things over the top, but not doing it perfectly. If I only have white canvas underneath there, it wouldn't look right because you'd have all this white packing through these parts that I'm missing. Let me just warm that right up. Okay, and I'll just run some of this through in here, varying the tone and the temperature. Now, as I said, this is a simple little painting. It's not a lot to it, and you'll be able to do this one fairly quickly. But what you will get, hopefully, is an understanding and appreciation of creating that separation between that distance and putting a little touch of green here and there in the background. Okay. Now it gets a little bit sort of dirty colour in here. I'm going to ignore that, and I'm just going to mix up a darker green in the corners here. just going to allow that earthy tone that we've created to pop through where it needs to. Pull it out of the brush, get a touch of water into the end, and just load the tip. Okay. And then we know we've got another post that sits around about, or it's, you know, a pole holding up the fence. There's one there, and then there's one about there. Now they are dark poles, so we don't need to highlight those. I just want to indicate them. And there's a whole lot of barbed wire. However, we don't want to indicate all of it. Just a few pieces is all we need. A little tip of water, I think, helps. Like so. Now I'll just stand back and have a look. That's good, I'm happy with that. Happy with that. So now we'll tackle these gates. So I'll just get a little bit more, get slightly to the red side, will be okay. And I have to work out, I've got 2 gates. Okay. And my challenge is that my tip is bent because I leave it sitting in the water. Don't do that. Don't do what I do. So I've got to be careful and think about how I'm going to actually apply this. Right? So I know that I'm going to have one part of my gate is going to sort of run down that way. It's going to run across to there. Now I'm not planning on painting this perfectly. I don't mind if it's a little bit rough, to be honest. A little bit rustic looking. And then the other one is going to run that way. And it's going to sort of just be moving away from there, like so. Both of them have a center piece like so, then they run down that way. And a few little details in there. Okay, so it's starting to come together. There's a little bit of a story happening there now. Happy with that. Okay, and you can see this greyed off area and lighter area in the back is now sitting further back in these stronger tones, and the warmer grasses and the oranges is starting to bring that forward now. So I think I'll leave it there. As a little simple demonstration painting though on how to create depth by splitting it and contrasting the background with these grey blue tones with this warmer foreground, creates a really easy to achieve sense of depth in the painting. And I think it's something that you should have a go at just to get an understanding of creating that depth in the painting there. It's a pretty simple little painting, it's just a simple exercise. Getting back to basics. Next week we'll do something a bit more complex, but for this week I think it's a good way to start the new year off by just focusing in on some of the basics and understanding how to create depth in a painting, especially if you want to do great landscape paintings. So I hope you've enjoyed this. My name's Rod Moore, Learn to Paint TV. Make sure you drop by our website, www.learntopainttv, and I'll see you next week on Learn to Paint TV. Cheers for now.